Hi, I'm Lindsay Sherbondy. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm here because I offered. And I said, could I step in? Because Dugan's at home on the couch. And so I will do my part. No, not to throw him under the bus. He says hi. He's doing great. He has a really hard job. He takes care of Ava mostly. There's my fam. Wow. So there's Phoenix, who's 8, and Ava, who's 12, and Dugan, who has recently cut his hair, so that's better. And there's me in the most mom photo I've ever seen. Because what's in my hands? We don't know. Mom stuff, just mom stuff. There's also our elf on the shelf on Ava, so have fun wondering about all those things in that photo. I have called Sun Prairie my home for 9 years, and I've called Heartland my home for, I've lost count, over 15, somewhere between 15 and 20. It is near and dear to my heart because I get to be up here today again because I offered and volunteered. I want to just take a second to tell you that the people that make church work here in this building, the volunteers, the people you see on stage, the people that you don't, they are like the best people. You always for me, I've been to a lot of churches in my life, and I wonder, what are they like really? And I just want to tell you that you are being served by the most authentic, loving, caring people that have shown up in enormous ways in our lives. And, oh, hey, hi, Ava. I had just sent a text saying, you can stay home. Sorry, that was just surprising. See, you're late and I'm not even with you. So, nobody forget that. Goober. It's the second service, so it's a little unhinged now, right? Because we already recorded. I'm a wife, a mom, an artist, a chronic key loser, an ice chewer. I'm sorry, I will always be late, but I will probably show up with a gift, and you can decide if that makes up for it or not. For some people it does, for some people it doesn't. I love antique malls, and I love opening up our home to people. Today I'm going to talk to you about some of what I'm personally walking through with God. As people have said, oh, I hear you're teaching at Heartland, I'm quick to correct them, like I am sharing at Heartland. I will leave the teaching to the professionals. I want to set your expectations. I go to church because I want answers, and I'm going to give you none. You won't be astounded with how much scripture I know or my extent of Jewish culture knowledge, but I believe that we are more alike than we are different, and that we can learn by shared experiences. So, again, I've got one Kleenex in my pocket. I gotta find it, put it right here. This guy is gonna be the main soldier in this talk. Nearly 5 years ago, our lives took a major turn. If you call Heartland home, you've heard maybe Dugan or Sharon talk about this, but the short version is, this is Ava the week of her accident. And she fell off a golf cart. I'll do the bullet points. She fell off a golf cart, sustained a traumatic brain injury, was in a coma, had no chance of surviving, brain swelling, months in rehab, cried for the first year plus. It didn't resolve for a long time. It was agonizing and awful to experience, and that was only the beginning of Ava's lengthy medical journey. At some point along the way, about 2 years in, Ava transitioned from a critical kid who'd been in a tragic accident to a kid with disabilities and lots of medical complexities. Sometimes medical professionals call kids like Ava chronic kids, a term that breaks my heart. I should tell you that there's lots of incredible things that have happened as part of our journey post Ava's accident. We laugh every day, have seen countless miracles. Ava is a miracle who experiences joy. Phoenix is amazing and thriving, and with God's grace, we're making it work one day at a time. Look at that smile. It's just the best. But the darkness and sin in my heart that were revealed as a result of Ava's accident is where this talk needs to camp out today, although I could talk about her smile forever. Having a medically complex child, in my experience, is really hard. Ava is fully dependent on us. We don't like to talk about it in terms like this, but everybody wants to know, how is she? And these are the questions that they're wondering. She's fully dependent on us, doesn't communicate with words, but she's really good at blinker. She's on a ventilator at night, is on currently over 10 meds she gets throughout the day, so about 30 meds. Eats through a G-tube, and her list of chronic conditions is long. We've spent over 400 days in the hospital in the last 5 years, and we've emergently called an ambulance more times than I have kept track of. She needs around-the-clock care. I tell Ava again and again, She is never a burden. And that is so true. Anyone that knows her knows this is true. She's incredible and so full of love and a huge blessing. And we are honored to care for her and to be her parents. It was easier when she wasn't in the room for the love of all things good and holy. But something can be both wonderful and hard at the same time, and that's what this life is, hard and wonderful. As an aside, can we stop saying that God doesn't give us more than we can handle? It's just not true, and it's not biblical. I'll tell you who isn't saying that. Parents who have prayed for miracles on emergency room floors, for one. And just let me say here that I'm going to talk about our journey because that's what I've experienced. But I would let you know that the week before Ava's injury, she had a swimmer's ear, and we were doing eardrops, and I thought it was like the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And so I think everybody kind of has like a 1 to 10 scale, in my personal opinion. Like your own hardest thing is your own hardest thing. So whether that's like a really awful teacher or a really awful diagnosis, when people say to us, like, I'm going through it, but I'm not going through something as hard as you're going through, I think it's also relative. So this is my experience and my journey, but I want you to have complete freedom that yours looks different, and it's okay if it's hard. I have a friend who struggles with depression. I have so many friends, and she's like, it feels really bad about it because her life is good. And it's like, don't feel that's just your journey, and that's your walk, and that's okay. But for us, there are so many times Dee and I look at each other and wave imaginary white flags and say, okay, we absolutely cannot handle this enough. But there's no free pass out of here, so we just continue on. Some days literally not handling it. Some days taking turns handling it. But if you could die from a broken heart or from the stress of making harder decisions about your child than you could ever imagine, we would have had spontaneously combusted by now. But alas, the sun keeps rising and setting, and so we are still here and we keep going. The stamina of which Dugan and I have to operate in our daily lives to care for Ava and manage the rest of our lives feels unsustainable at times. For others, when they step into it, they look at it and think, I don't know how you guys do it. You're amazing, they tell us. But what I think sometimes is, Dee and I were created out of the same stuff you are. We are human with the same basic needs and desires and brain powers and need for sleep as everyone else. It's no less hard for us than it would be for you. You just don't have to do it. Lucky you. It's just not that hard for you. Lucky you. Did you hear that? Did you hear the subtle door creak open as the sound of jealousy entered the group chat? That is jealousy that you hear in my voice. Now, to be clear, I wouldn't trade my life for anything. If I could step into someone else's life, I wouldn't take it because then I wouldn't have my people in it. But I do often wish that my life had the same players, but with less of the pain. Has anyone else ever felt this way? On that note, has anyone else been to counseling or in recovery? I have for both. You don't have to raise your hand. This is a Midwest nice here. Keep your cans to yourself. I'm not going to embarrass anybody. But I've been to both. And I'll tell you my least favorite part about counseling and recovery is that you go in with what I like to call your gateway problem. And mine was conflict. And then you figure that out. And then there's another problem right below the surface. And then I guess you just keep doing this forever. Like the work, I guess. So then I realized I struggled with anger. Once I got my anger mildly under control, that gave way to jealousy. Yay. How fun for me. Here I thought I'd be fixed by now. It's not cute to admit you struggle with jealousy. It's one of my least favorite things about myself. But let's talk about it for a bit. In my experience, my feelings of jealousy snuck up on me, and it took quite a while for me to be honest with myself enough to actually name them. Anger felt pretty easy and less shameful, but jealousy feels awful, both to acknowledge and to experience. And I wanted to rid myself of these feelings of jealousy as soon as I was honest enough with myself to realize what they were. For me, jealousy feels unproductive, it destroys my own self of contentment, and it makes me overall dissatisfied with my life. One of the things I actually love about myself and the way that God wired me is that I love to be generous. And so jealousy still actively feels totally paradoxical to the way I want to love people. I deeply want to be a part of other people's joy and champion other people's joy instead of jealous of the joy and the good that God is doing in their lives. Feeling jealous sucks. Did not ask if I could say that word. But here is the thing that jealousy does do for us. Jealousy can reveal what we most deeply desire. Think about it for a sec. Give yourself some time. When was the last time you felt jealous? It could be something big or small. It could be jealous of someone's boat, someone's spouse, someone's grades. I have prepared a chart for you. I also want you to know that I'm a professional artist. So that's the guy with muscles up there. And a guy in a boat, he's like, wee. These are just placeholders, but as I was talking with some of my little besties yesterday and some of my big besties, these are kind of the things that we have talked about, that the things that we can be jealous of fall under: material possessions, money, physical appearances, status, achievements, popularity, relationships, family, friends, etc., access and opportunity. We're talking about this a lot these days. That is a huge one. And it totally makes sense to be jealous of the access and opportunities that people have. Travel and experiences. This is the tricky one for me. For me, it's family vacations right now that get me the most, because the reality is that we can't take them anymore. So keep that in mind before showing me your Disney album, because this is a work in progress. Before I go on, let's establish that God hates jealousy. It's a sin. It does nothing good for us. And remember, I'm the first to confess. I'm preaching to myself. This isn't to condemn you, I promise. I would never be invited to throw the first stone. I promise. Here's what some of Scripture says about jealousy. A peaceful mind gives life to the body, but jealousy rots the bones. But if you're bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying, for jealousy and selfishness are not of God's wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. And I believe it's really tricky to be totally happy for someone and jealous at the same time. And the Bible tells us that jealousy isn't part of loving each other. 1 Corinthians says, you know it. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It's not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist its own way, is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in right. I think jealousy is dangerous individually as well as a body of Christ. It can be detrimental. Hebrews says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together in church. That's what it means in people's homes too, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching, as you see Jesus coming. So he's like, get together and be nice to each other because Jesus is coming. That's Bible according to Lindsay. That's what that means. So no one would argue, like, jealousy is so fun, do it more. And I think we're probably on the same page there. So what do we do when we encounter jealousy and jealous thoughts? And I'm asking this today because this is the question I immediately started to wonder to God, like, okay, well, I'm jealous, like, I don't know what to do with it, now what? I think in order to answer this question, and in order to answer it for myself, I needed to do some self-reflection and determine what type of jealousy I was experiencing. Determining this for me and for all of us will help us to know what path to take to deal with it so it's not stored up in our bodies, being all gross and making a mess. Caution, this research is based on my own brain. So the first type of jealousy is easy, and that's jealousy rooted in greed. If this is you, you want more always. You have an insatiable desire to be the best, have the best, keep getting better. You always have to be one-upping. If this is any of you, I actually have no helpful words for you at all. The only thing I might offer is that it will never be enough. Seriously, it will never be enough, and you will never be satisfied. I do have one piece of encouragement. I know someone who is like this, but then he got tired of the hunger that no fancy car or fancy promotion could satisfy. He devoted his life to Christ. He planted a church, and then his daughter became a pastor, and she is a co-lead pastor here. So I do know that God can do amazing things with your life if you hand it over to him. But I don't think this type of jealousy is most of you in the room here today. There are lots of desires we have that have completely pure motivations behind them. Just because something is a material thing, that doesn't make it bad. Even though I poked fun at my original list of things people are typically jealous of, trademark pending, a lot of these desires have wonderful reasons and goals and values associated with them, or they're just fun, and that's okay too. Hear me say, the sin is not in the desire for the thing, the sin is in the jealousy of the thing. And I actually believe that a lot of our jealousy has an unexpected origin, one that if we deal with it, we can move out of jealousy and towards God. In order to process our jealousy, it's important to ask ourselves, this is a big one, is what I'm jealous of actually attainable for me? Because if it is, it's time to turn that jealousy into something else more productive, and if it's not, that has a different path. Now, I am not a motivational speaker, so we're gonna focus mostly on the different path. But let me just say, if you're jealous of something attainable to you, what's stopping you? Like, follow your dreams. Woo. We would need to move from jealousy to motivation to action. But since I'm not a motivational speaker, I'm not actually your girl for that. So we're gonna move on. Because here is my hunch. My hunch is that if we were truly honest with ourselves, many of the things we're jealous of are not actually within our realm of possibility. If we evaluate the thing, whatever it is that we're jealous of, we might actually have less control over it than we think. I think in our Western culture of you can do anything, you can be anything, you can have everything, it's a sobering thought to stop and acknowledge that this might not actually be true for us. For some of us, that's more painfully obvious than others, but I think this is an important exercise to go through. And here's the real kicker. I believe that we are only actively jealous of the things that we think should be attainable to us, but aren't. Think about it. How many of you today came in here like actively jealous of Elon Musk? Or the guy in the cowboy hat with the rocket. I don't remember his name. Not many. Not many of you were like, oh, I'm so jealous of Elon Musk. It's because you're not expecting to be a billionaire. But who are we jealous of? We're jealous of our friends, our siblings, our neighbors, the people at the gym, like the people at work. We're jealous of the people we're in community with. You're not expecting to have a spaceship, but you do feel deserving of a little boat. Now, P.S., I love boats. There's nothing against having a boat. It's just the easiest example I can think of. So yay for your boat. Yay for wanting a boat. But if you were to look back at that checklist and take an honest inventory of your circumstances, the things you are jealous of that feel that they should be attainable to you most often are not. This is why seeing other people makes you jealous and not motivated. Because if it was something that was attainable to you, you would probably move quicker to motivation. But you're jealous. You're jealous. This is why seeing other people what they have makes you feel jealous. It's because this means that if it's not attainable for you, it's just not in the cards for you. And that truth hurts. The realization that you don't have something that you think is a reasonable desire, the realization that you don't have the elements necessary to achieve a dream, a goal, a deep desire, that, my friends, is grief. I believe that most jealousy is actually unrecognized and unreconciled grief in our lives. I'm going to say it again. I believe that most jealousy is actually unrecognized and unreconciled grief in our lives. If what I said earlier is true, that jealousy can reveal what we desire most, then our jealousy is in fact grief over unmet and unattainable desires. And whether that's due to tragedy or attainability or access or anything else, that's still grief nonetheless. In fact, if we were to evaluate our jealousy further, the truth is that we aren't generally upset that so-and-so has a boat, for example, or I'm not generally upset that so-and-so can go on vacation, for example. It's what the boat or the vacation represents. And then it's the harder stuff. It's God, why do they get to have a baby so easily and we don't? It's God, why do they get to have a great marriage and we don't? It's God, why do they get to have healthy kids, healthy parents, their own health, and I don't? It's God, how could you be so present in their lives, in their desires, in their dreams, and not mine? This is grief. It's the acknowledgement of lack or loss. And as Christians, and like for me personally, this feels extra personal because it's not like for us, like, oh, the stars just didn't align and the universe just didn't play out that way. Yes, sin entered the world. Yes, we have free will and therefore live in a broken world, but we've seen God move before. We've seen him flood the earth and make rainbows and heal Lazarus and put back on ears. No task is too big or too small. He is in the details. He intervenes in the midst of our free will. He intervenes in the midst of our sin. The Bible shows us he's capable of this again and again. And so we know as Christians that at any moment he could change our circumstances. Sometimes just one thing back in alignment is all it would take to meet the deep desires of our heart. I remember having this visualization after Ava fell off the golf cart. I mean, she's sitting and she just tipped off. And I just so many times just kept picturing God's big hand just you can flood the whole earth, Lord. It's just all it would have taken. And that was so hard for me because I know he can. And when he doesn't, that's a hard pill to swallow because he absolutely could. And so instead of sitting with that somber reality, instead of sitting with grief and lament and quiet, I become jealous and bitter and angry and negative because honestly, sometimes that feels better than the sobering truth. Maybe for you, this is the first moment that you're considering that your jealousy might actually be grief. And if that's you, that's amazing. Of course, it's not amazing that you're realizing that you're experiencing grief, but it's amazing because when we actually break down our emotions and call them what we are, we can move away from sin and towards God. And what I'm about to say is a bold statement, but just in my own journey and like post-trauma and in recovery, I would say that I think that so much of our sin is actually birthed out of pain or loss or grief. Nobody wakes up and says, like, I can't wait to be a sinner today. Like, I can't wait to be an addict today. These things happen because life can just be too hard to hold. We want so desperately, so badly to fill the voids, dull the hurt. I want so badly to fill the voids and dull the hurt. So we grasp at whatever we can to distract and dull from it, to transform into emotions that are easier for us to handle. Almost like more mainstream, easily digestible emotions. Lamenting is hard. Until recently, it's not something I've spent much time talking about or practicing in my life with my family, with my friends. It's not something we generally talk about, especially outside of death. Mostly, I think, because we're just really bad at being sad. Jealousy feels more palatable. Like if I was gonna sit with a group of friends and be like, oh, I'm super jealous, and then I was like, oh, I'm super lamenty today. But now I think in order to address the root issue is where the healing begins. Think about it. This is just a new thing I'm processing, but like, if you are jealous because you're always dissatisfied, the answer to that is gratitude, right? Gratitude list. I think gratitude is an awesome practice, so don't get me wrong. If you're jealous because you're dissatisfied, gratitude is the answer for that. But if you are jealous because of grief, gratitude will never fix that. Gratitude doesn't fix grief. Actually, nothing does. But this is where I have seen God and the Holy Spirit work in my own life. As soon as I started to acknowledge my jealousy for what it truly was, and not just that, I had to it wasn't just acknowledging, okay, this jealousy is actually grief. It's one, grieve what I was grieving, and then two, go to God and grieve that God wasn't fixing it for me. I had to grieve God's no's in my life. I had to grieve what I was grieving, and I had to grieve that God wasn't fixing it. Does that make sense that this is two important parts? At first, I started to just grieve the thing, but then I needed to go to God in my honesty and say, God, I'm really, my anger that's seeping out of me is I'm angry with you, and let me be one of the many people to tell you that God can handle it. Under this practice, I'm experiencing so much freedom. I still feel pangs of jealousy, but God has delivered me from so much of it, and I'm so grateful. So Ava was always dancing before her accident. There's her and Bray and Addie, two of her little besties. She was always dancing, always moving, always dancing everywhere. That was a cool outfit that she put together with a swimsuit bottom. She always moving, always dancing. And her best friend Bray and Addie, they both still do. Addie doesn't live here though, but we love her. Her best friend Bray still dances, and I love it when we get to see her perform. Ava does too. I couldn't possibly be more proud of Bray if she was my own in so many ways, and dance is just one of them. I love the privilege of watching Bray dance now, and I appreciate the skill and elegance the years have brought her. Inevitably, every recital at some point, a slow song comes on, and I can feel hot tears on my face. Grief, tears of grief. The realization of the duality of the two truths, but I'm so proud to watch Braylon, while also acknowledging that it's so incredibly unfair that Ava is sitting beside me watching it from a wheelchair instead of dancing beside her. But with God's grace, I don't even make a pit stop at jealousy, and I'm so thankful, because what jealousy would do here and what jealousy does for us is it would rob me twice. I would experience the grief for Ava. I wish she could still move her body and get to do so many things she can no longer do, but would also rob me of the incredible joy of seeing Braylon dance. And so I let the tears fall and acknowledge the place where grief and joy can exist at the same time. And so now what? Acknowledgement of our grief is the first step, to sit in it, to get comfortable with it. I've heard it said that it's important to welcome grief as a friend and offer it a seat at the table. Grief won't ever go away, but we can learn to live with it. Grief doesn't represent a lack of hope. We even see Jesus grieve. But grief does lament that things that haven't happened, at least not yet. And the real bummer is, I told you I wasn't a motivational speaker. The the real bummer is that our lives will be full of grief, of unmet desires, of unanswered prayers, and that is because we were made for more. We were made for a place where God fulfilled every desire of our heart, where we were made complete in his presence, not in the presence of the things on my jealousy list. But here we are, and here we will experience grief. But just as jealousy represents the desires of our heart, the desires of our heart represent a place that God created us to long for, and that is our hope. When I experience the jealousy I experienced on this side of Ava's accident, I'm reminded that jealousy is grief over what is lacking in this life. But at the same time, I'm reminded that the desires that come from God in this life will be fully satisfied by God in the next. I know that sometimes the answer of heaven can seem like a consolation prize here on earth. Like, heaven is great, but what do we do now? I am 42 years old. I think all the time, like, I could live to be 80, I could live to be 100. I have so many more years of grieving. It exhausts me. Like, that's a long time. So, heaven's great, but what do we do now? For a long time after Ava's accident, the verse where Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light," felt like an annoying verse for me, honestly. I felt like I was carrying literally 10,000 things and I kept giving them to God and I never ever felt any lighter. I still felt heavy. But lately I've realized what I think God really offers us here is companionship in the places that no one else can go. See, like, grief is so vast and so big and so specific. Anybody here that's ever experienced the presence of something, whether it's a person or something, and then it's not there anymore, grief feels almost undefinable. Other things like that, for me, it would be like betrayal or like deep loss or pain. It's the thing that, like, when you feel it, you don't even have words to describe it. And I think those things are where God is. And he is the only one who can truly comfort us because he's the only one who knows how this all works out. His yoke is easy and his burden is light because he knows how this all ends. He knows the prize waiting for us at the end. He knows it will be okay. And I think sometimes we're looking for everything else to sit in that with us. Let me tell you about one of my hardest conversations that was a non-medical conversation that I ever had after Ava's accident. Ava was at her physical rehabilitation facility, and Ashley hadn't been there yet. Ashley she's been at the birth of my babies. She's my maid of honor at my wedding. She's my constant. Anybody that knows Ashley knows, like, she's always like, it's gonna be great. And the other day, it was raining for the millionth time, and I feel like we were supposed to do something that did not involve rain, but she was just looking out my window, and finally she just goes, "It's cozy rain." And I was like, "It's not cozy rain. It's wet, and I want to be at the pool." But that's how she is. She's like, she just does, it's not Pollyanna. She just is, God has given her a gift to be able to see the beauty even when things are hard. And so I was desperate for Ava to come to rehab because Ava was crying nonstop, throwing up nonstop, sick nonstop. She was in constant back bends. It was awful. It was awful. And I could not wait for Ashley to come because I'm like, surely Ashley will see the silver lining here. Surely she will see the thing I don't see. And nothing. There were no words. She got there. She saw how Ava was. Ava is like her own daughter. Her heart was breaking. And I kept kind of looking at her like, it's time for the smart things, the smart, nice, positive things that you have to say. So we went to a coffee shop and just still nothing. And she was so sad and crying. And I was sad and crying. And I was like, "Hey, you're up now. Like, I'm ready for some encouragement. I feel weary. I cannot handle this." And she started just weeping and said, "I am on the same side of the table as you. I am here in it with you. I have nothing to give you," through tears. And that was when I was like, "Oh, this is really bad. Ashley thinks this is bad. This is really bad." And I was so devastated. Ashley is my constant processor, cheerleader, positive thinker, bright side friend. I'd been desperate for her to come in and see the silver lining I could not see, but in her humanness, she could not carry the weight. No one could. Not Sharon, not Sarah, not Chris, not John, not many of you. It was simply too big, too much. But God could, and he was my only hope. Once nobody else could carry it anymore, finally I was like, "Guess it's you and me." But I had also been counting on God to fix it, begging him to. But when we bring our grief to God, when I brought my grief to God and literally just sat in it with him, I think that is the only way we truly experience peace with it. Hear me, friends, this doesn't mean that we give up hope. Revelation says that someday God will take away all their tears. There will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All the old things will have passed away. But that day is not today. And even though Jesus Christ, the Son of God, knew there was an ultimate plan with more certainty than anyone has ever walked this earth, he still cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And he still grieved, even though he knew the outcome. Jesus grieved, and in order to healthfully process and proceed through this life, so must we. I want to show you some things. Show and tell time. I won't sing. This is a painting I painted after God gave me a vision of walking through a forest with him. And this is Ava's go bag. Some of you have things like this in your life. When Ava got her tracheostomy to help her breathe, we had to practice packing our go bag. And in it has everything that Ava needs to keep her alive in an emergency. That's not actually true. She doesn't have it. But it's got a lot of her medical stuff. This is important. We take it with her everywhere. She's got an extra one, so nobody would be worried. So it's very heavy. Some of you have jobs that require backpacks. Some of you go backpacking. It's got fun things on it, things her friends have given her. It's got weird things in it that nobody else would know what to do with, or very few of you. This bag, to me, is really hard. It's hard. When we got handed this bag, I was like, this is another step of our life being very different. And this is a physical bag, but a lot of us, we all have bags. We all have bags with stuff in it, and we all have, just most of them are metaphor, and I'm gonna share with you just something that God gave me a picture of. And so, if you would just use these things as part of if they're helpful, as part of your thinking. But I want you to go ahead and close your eyes and picture a forest. And you're walking with Jesus through it. Walking with Jesus through the forest. Think about the things that you're hearing. You get to a clearing and you're exhausted because you have been carrying the heaviest backpack ever. When you get to a good spot to rest, you set your backpack down on the ground between you and Jesus. Thud. You kind of look at him like, okay, I think this is where you're supposed to go ahead and pick it up now, Jesus, right? But he stares at it with love and empathy and tears. Let's take a look. He nods towards the heavy backpack. So you unpack it. You set things down one by one in between you and he, all around you both. Oddly shaped things, big things, small things, sharp things, smooth things. And after a while, you're both surrounded by its contents and you sob. Each thing is an event, a memory, a tragedy, bad stuff, hard stuff, painful stuff, triggering stuff, some beautiful, some hard to look at. And Jesus weeps with you. Still crying, Jesus picks up some pieces, but not everything, and puts them back in his own backpack. And this is where you expect him to pick it all up, put it back in the pack, and put it on his own shoulders. But no, he doesn't. You're confused. Isn't he up? Isn't it time? But he gestures again, looking at the road ahead of you. Still confused, you shrug. I guess I'll just pack up the rest of the bag then. And so you do, but this time you pack it differently. You put the heavy things at the bottom. You fill the sides with the small things. You relish in the smooth ones, and you wrap the sharp ones. There are some things you realize you don't need anymore, and so you leave them there on the ground where you're sitting in the sunlight. Jesus stands, and you put your bag back on and stand up next to him. It feels heavy, but lighter. He starts walking, and you follow, and you realize that you don't actually know where you're going. How much longer? What's next, you ask? But he doesn't answer. This goes on and on, over and over. You walk, you stop, you sit, you unpack, you repack. He takes some, you repack again. Sometimes he visibly takes more, and sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he takes it all, but most of the time, he doesn't. You repack and unpack and repack. But ultimately, you know that he has shared more of the contents than you've seen because you are still walking, still going. You know if the contents of the bag had piled up the way you experienced them, continuing on would be impossible. The fact that you are still going is proof he is carrying them. Maybe there's a reason we still feel the backpack at all, you wonder. The backpack phrase, and you finally say that you don't know if the backpack will make it to your final destination. And then you realize what Jesus already knows. you won't actually need your heavy backpack in the place he's ultimately leading you to.